No one expected the smallest person in the room to end it in 5 seconds. The sound of bodies hitting the mat echoed through the dojo, followed by silence that felt heavier than the air itself. Every eye was locked on her, a girl they had mocked for months, called names when the instructor wasn't listening, laughed at when she stumbled. But this time she didn't stumble. This time she stood tall, while the black belts who mocked her were left stunned, flat on the ground. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What started as an ordinary sparring session quickly turned into something the internet couldn't stop watching. Phones were out, cameras rolled. Within minutes, that 5-second clip was all over social media, a video that divided millions. Some called it justice, others called it humiliation, but few knew the story behind it. Few understood what led to that moment, the quiet frustration, the months of ridicule, the one final push that made her snap. And as the clip spread, so did the questions. Who was she? Why did a group of black belts, supposedly symbols of discipline and honor, turn on one of their own? Was this a test that went too far, or something much more deliberate? And how did that short, shocking fight change everything, not just for her, but for an entire community that thought it understood respect? Online, people debated endlessly. She deserved it, some said. They pushed her too far, said others. But hidden behind those comments was a truth no one had yet uncovered, a truth that started long before that viral clip, long before the cameras, in a small-town dojo where respect was preached, but not always practiced. For years, Tasha Rivers was invisible, except to the ones who laughed the loudest. In middle school, she was the quiet girl who sat at the back of the cafeteria, eating her lunch alone while trying to ignore the whispers. She's slow. She's lazy. She'll never change. The words clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. At home, she didn't complain. Her mother worked double shifts at a local diner, often too tired to notice the bruises that weren't on Tasha's skin, but on her confidence. Every night, she'd scroll through her phone watching fitness influencers and fighters, wondering what it felt like to be strong, not just on the outside, but in a way that made people listen when you spoke. One day she walked past a small martial arts dojo on Main Street, the sound of gloves hitting pads, the rhythm of movement, the discipline. It drew her in like gravity. She signed up the next week with money she'd saved from babysitting. The Meadowville Karate Dojo was the kind of place that took pride in tradition. The walls were lined with trophies, the floor spotless, the air thick with the faint scent of sweat and focus. Its head instructor, Master Collins, preached values like respect and humility, but his students didn't always listen. Among them were 3 senior black belts, Chad, Brett, and Ethan. They'd been there for years, confident, skilled, admired. Together they ran the place like their own kingdom. New students followed their lead. And when Tasha arrived, heavy-set, unsure, with a borrowed GI that didn't quite fit, they noticed her right away, but not the way she'd hoped. They smirked when she struggled with basic stances, exchanged looks when she couldn't keep up during warm-ups, and whispered things she could hear but wasn't meant to. Still, she kept showing up, day after day, week after week. She'd come early to stretch when no one was around. She'd practice her forms long after everyone had gone home. While others laughed, she learned. While they sparred for fun, she studied their movements. Every habit, every mistake, every opening. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could become someone stronger than the voices that tried to break her. But in the dojo's tight-knit world, respect wasn't just earned through effort. It was often given based on appearance, reputation, or rank. The black belts called her Tank, a cruel nickname that started as a joke and stuck. "Hey, Tank, try not to shake the floor this time," Brett would say after class, loud enough for everyone to hear. She'd force a smile, hide the hurt, and walk home in silence. What they didn't realize was that she was growing, not just in skill, but in patience, in restraint, in something they mistook for weakness. A few months later, Master Collins announced an evaluation day, a series of sparring tests to determine who was ready for their next belt. For most, it was routine. But for Tasha, it was personal. That morning she tied her belt tighter than usual, her hands trembling slightly as she stood before the mirror. She could still hear Chad's voice from the night before. "Let's see if Tank can even last a round." The others laughed. She didn't. She just looked at herself and whispered, 5 seconds, that's all I need. When the day came, the dojo was crowded. Students lined the walls, phones ready, eager to record whatever happened next. No one expected much. No one thought she had a chance. But that's the thing about underestimating someone. It makes their victory unforgettable. They didn't see her as a student. They saw her as a target, and that mistake would cost them more than they ever imagined. Would you have kept training if every day felt like a reminder that you didn't belong? Would you have walked into that dojo again, knowing they were waiting for you to fail? Or would you have given up long before the moment the whole world finally saw you for who you truly were? The day of the evaluation began like any other Saturday at Meadowville Dojo. The mats were freshly cleaned, the banners perfectly aligned, and the faint hum of chatter filled the air. Students warmed up in rows, each movement sharp, disciplined, rhythmic. But Tasha stood quietly in the corner, tightening her gloves with slow precision. Her heart was steady, not racing, not anxious, just focused. It had taken her 2 years to earn this calm. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered "Tank." They had built the steel she carried in her chest now. When Master Collins called her name, the room seemed to pause. "Rivers," he said, glancing up from his clipboard. "You're up next. Sparring round, full contact." He didn't need to say who her opponent was. Chad was already walking to the center of the mat, his grin wide, his confidence almost theatrical. His friends, Brett and Ethan, leaned against the wall, phones ready, waiting for the spectacle. To them, this wasn't a match. It was entertainment. They had no idea what was about to happen. Tasha bowed respectfully, her gaze never leaving Chad's. He smirked, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. "Let's see if the floor survives this, Tank." A few chuckles rippled through the students watching, but Tasha said nothing. She simply stepped into stance. Her breathing slowed, her weight centered. She remembered every lesson, every night she'd practiced alone when no one was there to laugh. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to herself that she'd never quit, no matter who stood across from her. The round began. Chad charged first, fast and aggressive, a flurry of kicks designed to overwhelm her. The crowd shouted in excitement, phones raised higher. For a split second it looked like he had control, until Tasha stepped aside with precision, catching his leg mid-air, sweeping him to the ground in one seamless motion. Gasps erupted. Chad scrambled up, humiliated, tried again, but she was faster this time. A jab, a sidestep, a twist of her hips, and suddenly he was flat on the mat again. 5 seconds, that's all it took. The room went silent. The only sound was Chad's breathing, heavy, ragged, frustrated. His friends stopped recording, their smirks fading into disbelief. Master Collins hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or let the silence speak for itself. Then, breaking through the tension, Ethan called out, "Lucky shot." But the look in his eyes betrayed something else. Fear. Chad stood again, pride wounded, refusing to accept what just happened. "One more round," he demanded. Master Collins opened his mouth to refuse, but Tasha spoke first. "No," she said calmly, bowing again. "We're done." The firmness in her tone caught everyone off guard. She turned, walking toward the locker room, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt like truth itself had landed on the mat. That 5-second clip, the takedown, the stunned silence, Chad's disbelief. It was uploaded before she even left the building. By evening, it had spread across social media. The caption read, "Black belts target obese girl. 5 seconds later, they're on the ground." Views climbed into the millions overnight. Comments poured in. "She's a legend." She showed them what real strength looks like. But not everyone was kind. Some mocked her size. Others called it staged. A few even tried to defend the black belts, claiming the video was edited. Meanwhile, at the dojo, things were tense. The next morning, reporters waited outside. Parents called, asking questions. Students whispered in corners. Master Collins avoided the press, but inside, the atmosphere had changed. The black belts who once ruled the room walked quieter now, and Tasha, she didn't come back that week, or the one after. But what the internet didn't see was what happened next. What that 5-second clip set in motion behind closed doors. The fallout would reveal just how deep the cracks ran in Meadowville's perfect facade. Tell me, if you were Tasha, would you have walked away after that victory? Or would you have gone back to face them again, knowing the world was now watching? In the days following the viral clip, Meadowville Karate Dojo stopped feeling like a place of discipline and honor. The parking lot, once filled with families and laughter, turned into a scene of quiet tension. Cars would pull in, parents walking their children to the entrance, whispering under their breath. The same students who used to slap each other on the back now avoided eye contact. Because no matter what anyone said, everyone had seen the video, and everyone had an opinion. Tasha stayed home. She deleted her social media accounts after the third night. The attention that had felt empowering at first soon began to feel invasive. Reporters left notes at her door. Strangers messaged her, some calling her an inspiration, others calling her a fraud. "You embarrassed them," one message read. "You ruined the dojo." It wasn't from a stranger. It was from a student she'd once helped during a belt test. That one message hit differently. For the first time since the fight, Tasha began to question if she'd done something wrong. Meanwhile, the video continued spreading. Major news outlets picked it up, twisting the story to fit their headlines. Teen girl defeats black belt in 5 seconds. Bullying backfires at local dojo. But none of them knew what really happened behind those mats. And at the center of it all, Master Collins faced growing pressure from parents and sponsors demanding answers. The dojo had always prided itself on discipline, respect, hierarchy, but now that image was collapsing. The local paper even ran a story titled, "The Fall of Meadowville Dojo, When Respect Fails." 2 weeks later, the investigation began. It started quietly, a call from the Martial Arts Federation to review Meadowville's practices. But soon, it turned into something much bigger. Anonymous complaints surfaced about favoritism, verbal bullying, even unsafe sparring conditions. A few students admitted that the black belt crew had mocked others before, but no one had spoken up. "It was just how things were," one student said. "If you weren't part of them, you were beneath them." When investigators reached out to Tasha, she hesitated. Her mum encouraged her to tell the truth, but part of her didn't want to relive it. Sitting in that small conference room, facing 2 officials with notepads, she replayed the scene again. The laughter, the challenge, the silence afterward. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't cry. She simply told them what happened. "They thought I was a joke," she said quietly. "I just wanted to earn respect." What happened next surprised everyone. The Federation temporarily suspended the dojo's operations pending review. Chad, Brett, and Ethan were stripped of their teaching assistant privileges. But instead of accepting responsibility, Chad's family went public, claiming Tasha had attacked him unfairly, that the fight wasn't sanctioned, that the clip had been edited to make him look bad. For a moment, public opinion started to split. Some believed her, others didn't. Tasha could have disappeared then, turned off her phone and moved on. But she didn't. She made one post, and her first and last since the video went viral. It was a photo of her old white belt, frayed at the edges. The caption read, "Respect is earned when no one's watching." It wasn't loud or defensive. It was quiet, honest, and it hit people harder than any fight ever could. That post reignited the story, this time with a different tone. Instead of focusing on the fight, people started asking the real questions. Why did a dojo allow bullying to exist in the first place? Why did it take one viral clip for anyone to care? And that's when the story took another turn. A former instructor came forward, sharing his own experience, how he'd left Meadowville years earlier because of the same group of black belts who thought they were untouchable. He described the same toxic culture Tasha had faced: favoritism, humiliation, silence. The media started connecting the dots. What had started as a viral video about an underdog victory had become a symbol of accountability, a mirror held up to a culture that had forgotten its own principles. Weeks later, Tasha returned to the dojo. It wasn't for revenge or attention. She came quietly during off hours to pick up her gear. The mats were empty, the lights dim. Master Collins was there, alone, sweeping. When he saw her, he froze, then slowly said, "You taught us all a lesson, didn't you?" She didn't answer. She just smiled faintly, bowed, and walked out. As the door closed behind her, you couldn't help but wonder, how many people like Tasha exist right now? People quietly enduring ridicule, waiting for one moment to prove they belong. Would you have had the courage to stand your ground like she did, knowing it could turn your entire life upside down? Because sometimes real strength doesn't come from winning a fight. It comes from standing alone, when the world expects you to fall. Months passed since that 5-second clip shook Meadowville. The dojo eventually reopened, smaller, quieter, and different. The old banners of competition victories had been replaced with new ones. Respect, discipline, honor. Simple words. But now they meant something again. Tasha never went back to train there, yet somehow her presence was everywhere. Her story had traveled far beyond that small town. It was being shared in schools, martial arts forums, and even on national talk shows, as a lesson about courage and accountability. But the attention didn't change her much. She still woke up early to help her mum with chores, still walked past the same coffee shop where some people whispered when they saw her. It stung at first, but she learned something powerful. Respect earned through truth lasts longer than validation earned through noise. She wasn't chasing acceptance anymore. She was chasing peace. Then one evening, she received an email from a man she didn't know. He was a sensei from another state. He wrote, "I showed your video to my students. One of them said you gave her hope to stay." It was short, simple. And yet it hit Tasha harder than any headline. For the first time she realized, her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every person who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or humiliated for being different. Meanwhile, the Meadowville Black Belt crew, Chad, Brett, and Ethan, went their separate ways. Chad left martial arts completely. Brett stayed, but switched dojos, saying he wanted to start over. Ethan eventually reached out to Tasha, months later. His message was short. "I'm sorry for what we did. You didn't deserve that." She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. Maybe forgiveness takes time. Maybe it's never spoken aloud. But deep down, she understood that change often starts with discomfort. Around the same time, a local reporter revisited the story for a follow-up documentary, not about the fight, but about what happened afterward. They filmed community members talking about how that single moment forced them to look inward. One parent said, "I used to tell my son to ignore bullying, that it's just part of growing up. But when I saw what that girl went through, I realized, silence makes us part of the problem." And just like that, what started as humiliation had turned into a quiet revolution. Across the country, martial arts schools began reviewing their conduct codes, implementing anti-bullying policies, training instructors to spot emotional abuse early. They called it the Rivers Standard, named after Tasha, a name she never asked for, but one she earned. A year later, Tasha stood on a small stage at a youth conference. She wasn't a fighter anymore, at least not in the traditional sense. Her hands no longer bore calluses from sparring, but her words hit with the same precision. "I used to think strength meant keeping your head down," she said softly. "Now I know real strength is standing tall, even when no one claps for you." The audience was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. That night, as she walked home, she passed by the same dojo. The lights were off, the sign faintly flickering. She stopped for a moment, looking through the window, the same mats, the same mirrors, but everything felt different. She whispered quietly, "Thank you," and kept walking. Her story had come full circle. What began as a moment of humiliation had become a movement of healing. And for anyone watching her journey, one question remained. If you were in her shoes that day, surrounded by laughter and doubt. Would you have had the courage to stand your ground? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you have fought for your dignity? Because sometimes, history doesn't remember the strongest. It remembers the one who refused to stay down. The video that once shocked the internet now feels like a distant echo. What people saw as a 5-second fight was never just about strength, weight, or skill. It was about self-worth, about standing up when the world insists you sit quietly in the corner. Tasha's journey reminded everyone watching that sometimes the people you overlook the most carry the loudest lessons. Her story began in silence, the whispers, the mockery, the isolation, but it ended in power. Real power. The kind that doesn't need applause to exist. For months after, people would still message her online, some sharing their own stories of humiliation, others admitting they had been the bully once, and didn't realize the damage they caused. And Tasha would read every single one. She didn't see them as reminders of pain, but as proof of something bigger, that empathy can grow from guilt, and that change starts when we stop pretending we're blameless. She once told a local reporter, "I didn't win that day because they fell. I won because I stood up for myself without hating them." Those words spread further than the video ever did. They became quotes on posters, captions under photos, and reminders in countless classrooms. In a way, she became the kind of role model she once needed. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And maybe that's what people connected with most. Because this story isn't just about a girl in a dojo. It's about anyone who's ever been laughed at for trying. Anyone who's ever been underestimated because of how they look, where they come from, or how different they seem. It's a reminder that respect isn't given. It's earned through resilience, through quiet, consistent courage when no one believes in you. As this story reaches its end, take a moment to think about your own. Think about the times you stayed silent when someone needed you to speak up. Think about the moments you doubted yourself, because others did too. And now ask yourself this: what would you have done in Tasha's place? Would you have stayed down or stood your ground? Before we end, let us know in the comments what part of this story hit you the hardest. How did it make you feel about the way people treat others when they think no one's watching? Do you believe Tasha's response was right, or would you have handled it differently? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're still here, thank you for watching till the end. Stories like this aren't just told. They're shared, felt, and remembered. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because next week's story might just change the way you see people forever.